as a German, I'd like to apologize for a language. Mähdrescher! Flugzeug! Okay, I can see that. That kind of scares me too. Flugzeug. Aschenputtel. Does that make sense? Not really. Doesn't make sense to German ears either. Boom, boom. Hello, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Felicia. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio on and off since 2016. So a few years ago, there was this video that went viral. I'm sure most of you guys have seen it. It's called How German Sounds Compared to Other Languages. There are several parts of this even, and if I remember correctly, this mainly went viral on Facebook back in the day, which I think was about 8 years ago or so. But these sketches are timeless, and I've gotten a lot of requests from you guys lately to react to these videos. I personally haven't really seen them in a while, so I figured, why not? Let's do it. Let's watch them together. Okay, so I'm gonna watch it down here on my laptop with my headphones, and I'd say let's start with the first part.
Avion.
Aeroplane.
Aero.
Avion.
Flugzeug.
Surprise.
Surprise.
Sorpresa.
Sorpresa.
Überraschung.
Überraschung! Okay, I would say let's stop right here. It's gonna keep going like that. I know it is definitely funny. I'm gonna have to interrupt it here and there for me to actually react to stuff. So obviously this is comedy, and this was also made by Germans, and it is really funny, but I feel like I should say that for those of you who aren't that familiar with Germans and the German language, of course we don't always scream like that, and the guy who plays the German also totally overpronounces the consonants to make it probably sound even more angry and kind of like what German is supposed to sound like stereotypically. And the outfit and the props that they used here are really just showing a stereotypical Bavarian, which is just one region of Germany. Obviously they do that with all the languages here, like the French person has a baguette and red wine, and then the Italian person had some pasta there. But I feel like in a lot of parts of the world, people seem to equate German culture with nothing but Bavarian culture. And I just want to make sure that you guys know that Germany has many other cultural regions as well that are very different from Bavarian culture. Now, the first word he pronounced Flugzeug, while a normal German would probably usually pronounce it more like Flugzeug. Or if I were to do the lovely sounding voice that they did for the other languages, it would probably be something like Flugzeug. Which, by the way, is one of those super descriptive German words that we have a lot of. Flugzeug literally means flying thing. I mean, it's pretty accurate, right? Now, the words in French, Italian, Spanish, and English often sound so similar to each other because they have similar roots. In this case, avion comes from the Latin word avis, which means bird, and aeroplane goes back to the ancient Greek word aeroplanos. I think, at least that's how I'll pronounce it in German. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, but aeroplanos would mean something like wandering in air. Now, German has influences from Latin and Greek as well, but especially for Latin, that influence is much stronger in English, and especially also for French and Spanish and Italian. For the second word, surprise, the Spanish, Italian, and English one all go back to the French one, which again has its origins in Latin. Surpris is the past form of surprendre, which means to overtake. The German one, Überraschung, can be translated to something like overrush in a way, because über means over, and then Raschung comes kind of from like überraschen, and raschen can kind of go back to rush in English. So then the idea behind that is kind of similar to surprendre, like to overtake, to overrush, to overtake. Now, while he said Überraschung, Germans usually pronounce this word probably more like Überraschung. Überraschung. Or if you actually surprise someone, Überraschung! Yeah. I'm not gonna go into detail about the origin for every single word in here, but I'm definitely gonna show you every time how Germans would usually pronounce it when they're not angry. And by usually, I mean how people would pronounce it in standard German, which is also what I speak. So, yeah.
Papillon.
Butterfly.
Farfalla.
Mariposa.
Schmetterling.
Schmetterling. Schmetterling can sound kind of pretty too if you say it nicely. Oh, ich habe einen Schmetterling gefangen. Schmetterling. Schmetterling.
Stilo.
Pen.
Penna.
Plume.
Kugelschreiber.
Okay, I would say Kugelschreiber, which, yeah, is not the prettiest word, but it's also not exactly the literal translation for pen, because pen I would probably more translate with just Stift in German, der Stift, whereas Kugelschreiber is more specific, it's a ballpoint pen. So yeah, that doesn't necessarily sound that great in English either. Oh, and you can also actually just use the short form of that and say Kuli or Kuli, kinda depends. I usually say Kuli.
Marguerite.
Daisy.
Margarita.
Margarita.
Gänseblümchen.
Okay, so I would pronounce it Gänseblümchen, which literally translates to something like geese flower, because Gänse are geese and then Blümchen is flower, but it also has the diminutive ending, chen, so that kind of indicates that something is small and cute in German. What's funny about the French, Italian, and Spanish version of the word is that we actually have another plant in Germany that we do call Margariten, so very similar to what they said, but it's not quite the same plant as a typical daisy, so it's not quite the same as a Gänseblümchen. They look very similar, but Margariten are bigger than daisies, and we sometimes even have them as potted plants for decoration. I'm not sure if the plant just doesn't exist anywhere else outside of Germany where these other languages are spoken, or if they just don't really differentiate between the two. Which is an interesting topic, by the way, that I'm probably gonna make a video about sometime, how different languages sometimes carry different concepts with them. This might be one example for that, like if you grow up with French as your native language, you might not really differentiate between those two plants, but in German we definitely do. Or how in English you have the words venom and poison, depending on whether it's within an animal or not, whereas in German we call all of that gift. It really doesn't matter where it is, if it's within an animal or a chemical or, you know, or even everything that you call toxins in English is gift too. So we don't really think in those categories here. We just think about, okay, is this something that's gonna harm you? Is this gonna kill you? Then it's gift. So your native language sometimes influences in what kind of categories you think about certain things, if that makes sense. But let's get back to the video. Next one.
Ambulance.
Ambulance.
Ambulanza.
Ambulanza.
Ambulance.
Krankenwagen.
Okay, I can see that. That kind of scares me too. So Krankenwagen, I'm not even sure if I could say that any prettier. I probably wouldn't scream it, but I would say Krankenwagen, which literally is a sick vehicle. So, you know, even though it doesn't sound pretty, I think German kind of nails it.
Science.
Science.
Scienza.
Ciencia.
Naturwissenschaften.
Okay, he kind of exaggerates here. Naturwissenschaften! But it is a funny word though, so I would probably usually just say Naturwissenschaft. And it's funny because in German, the word Wissenschaft stands for really all kinds of scholarly disciplines, whether it's humanities, social sciences, or natural sciences. And when we want to make it clear that we mean chemistry, physics, or biology, etc., then we call them Naturwissenschaften, which is what he said here. Before we move on to part 2, I'd like to say thank you to today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community where millions of people come together to take the next step in their creative journey. They have thousands of inspiring video classes on all different kinds of topics, including things like illustration, photography, video, freelancing, coding, or even language classes. The classes include a combination of video lessons and hands-on projects, and you can get feedback from a community of millions. If you're active on social media, you've probably noticed how, in the last year or so, short videos like the ones on TikTok have become more and more popular. Instagram has established the Reels, and YouTube has launched the YouTube Shorts with a similar concept. The cool thing about those short videos is that anyone can be a creator with those and just produce a funny sketch or a cool dance clip or whatever you want, and you don't really need any fancy equipment or editing software. But sometimes it can be hard to fit everything that you want to express into the 1-minute time limit, or sometimes it's even just 30 seconds. I struggle with this myself. I mean, you guys know how long my videos on here tend to get, so keeping things under 1 minute is a challenge for me when I actually have something to say. That's why I was really thrilled when I stumbled across this class by video producer Elise Narvaez called Video for Instagram, Tell an Engaging Story in Less Than a Minute. She talks about all the storytelling aspects, but also about the technical things that might help you, such as jump cuts or integrating text on screen.
We'll cover concepts around mood and theme, incorporating music and text. I'll also go over some basics around cinematography, framing, and editing.
The cool thing is that Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, so there are no ad breaks and they're always launching new premium classes. You can join Skillshare too. Just check out my link in the description below, because the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can start exploring your creativity today. Now let's move on with part 2.
Hippopotam.
Hippopotamus.
Ippopotamo.
That sounded so cute in French. Hippopotam.
Hippopotamo.
Nilpferd.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're cute animals. I know that they're dangerous, but I would probably more pronounce it Nilpferd. Nilpferd, which literally means Nile horse.
Sex.
Sex.
Getting juicy.
Sesso.
Sexo.
Geschlechtsverkehr.
Okay, I would pronounce this Geschlechtsverkehr, but it's also not all that accurate actually, because we actually do use the word sex in German as well, but Geschlechtsverkehr is another word for sex, and technically it's not 100% the same thing, because usually Geschlechtsverkehr is more used to specifically refer to intercourse. I think sometimes people use it in other contexts too, but usually it means intercourse, and literally it translates to gender traffic. Yeah, I think Germany wins.
Pardon.
Sorry.
Scusa.
Pardon.
Entschuldigung.
That one wasn't even that bad. Entschuldigung is how I would say that, and literally this word means something along the lines of unguilting, because Schuld, this little word in the middle, means guilt, and then Entschuldigung kind of means taking the guilt off you, which is not something that we actively think about when we use the word, but when I did think about it just now, I was like, yeah, technically this would be like taking the guilt off my shoulders.
Hospital.
Hospital.
Ospitale.
Hospital.
Krankenhaus.
Okay, we're kind of back to like what we had before with the Krankenwagen. Krankenhaus is how I would say this. He says Krankenhaus. I would say Krankenhaus, which again is not that pretty of a word still, but it's not as scary as what he did, and it literally translates to sick house, which again is just beautifully descriptive.
Cendrillon.
Cinderella.
Cenerentola.
Cenicienta.
Aschenputtel.
Aschenputtel. I would probably pronounce it Aschenputtel. Aschenputtel. Okay, still not that pretty, but this is the name of Cinderella in the German version of the folk fairy tale. Just like the Grimm brothers, who were German, wrote it down in their collection in the early 19th century. But to be fair, this fairy tale existed in many different languages and countries at the same time, and there were countless names for Cinderella at the time. Aschenputtel in German includes the word Asche, which is German for ashes, which I think just has to do with her like having to clean up the house and sitting down by the fire pit and all those kinds of things that are part of the story, at least the story that I know from the Brothers Grimm version. Which brings me to the next point. If you're interested in fairy tales, you should totally check out my video on Disney versus Grimm fairy tales. I'm just gonna put it up here somewhere and also in the info box below. And on to the next one.
Canary.
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 Canario.
Canary.
Canary.
Mario.
Kanarienvogel.
I would say Kanarienvogel. Kanarienvogel. It's almost the same word actually, as you can probably see, except that we call it a canary or canary bird. And yeah, so Vogel means bird. And with that, let's move on to part 3.
Que me llamaste?
Oh yeah.
Mineral.
Combine.
Combine.
Mähdrescher!
Okay, so it looks like the first two parts were shot together, like at the same time with the same people, same setting and everything. And now this one has new languages, and I'm not quite sure if it's new people. I didn't really pay attention to their faces, but it's definitely new languages. So now they have Japanese, Swedish, English, but this time American English, Portuguese from Brazil, and then German again, of course, which last time they had Spanish and it was supposed to be Mexican Spanish, I believe. It did not actually mention that. But okay, so this word he said, let's go back a little bit.
Mähdrescher!
And I would say Mähdrescher. Mähdrescher. Also not the most beautiful word in German, but you don't have to go like Mähdrescher. Yeah, next one. Oh, this is a major one in Germany.
Speed limit. Restrição de velocidade.
Geschwindigkeitsbegrenzung!
The American one is hilarious. I said this is a major one in Germany because I don't know if you guys know this, but we don't have a speed limit on a lot of parts on the German Autobahn, and the whole speed limit topic is kind of as controversial, maybe not quite as controversial, but comparable to the whole gun control issue in the United States, where there's people who are totally on the one side and totally on the other side. In Germany, it's kind of been a traditional thing that we don't have a speed limit on a lot of the parts of the Autobahn, but a lot of people argue that it would be a lot safer if we did have speed limits everywhere, and it would also be better for the environment. I'm with those people who say that it's insane that we don't have speed limits, but there are all these other people that argue, well, it'd be insane to implement a speed limit, it's always been like that, it's part of our identity, it's tradition, etc., etc. I'm not trying to get political though, so Geschwindigkeitsbegrenzung, this is how I would say it, is not actually the most common word to say it. It is, I think, the more proper term for this, which Geschwindigkeit means speed, and then Begrenzung is one word that we have for limit, but it's actually more common in German in like everyday speech to just call it Tempolimit. Tempolimit. And the reason that Geschwindigkeitsbegrenzung is such a long word is that in German, whenever we put together several words and make it a new compound word, we don't leave any spaces in between. So yeah, we really actually form one new word, whereas in English you would usually leave a space in between. You would say Tempo limit. In German we go Tempolimit. Geschwindigkeitsbegrenzung.
Sackbarrow. Dali. Pano de saco.
Sackkarre!
Sackkarre is how I would say that, which is literally a sack carrier. I'm wondering if the people who speak Japanese and Swedish also, and obviously the other languages too, but mostly those two because I feel like a lot of the audience probably doesn't speak those languages, if they actually say it accurately. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you speak any of those languages. Do they actually say it correctly? I'd be curious about that. Okay, next one. Ah, juicy again.
Nipple. Nipple.
Nipple.
Brustwarze!
Okay, I would pronounce it Brustwarze, and I've actually mentioned this on my YouTube Shorts video on descriptive German words before, because it is indeed a pretty funny word when you think about it, because it literally means breast wart. Breast and wart. But even though it is a common word in German, we actually also call it Nippel in German too, just like in English and the other languages. So you can either call it Nippel or Brustwarze. Okay, next one.
Shaver. Shaver. Barbeador.
Rasierapparat!
I would say Rasierapparat. But the term Rasierapparat isn't actually all that common to say in everyday language. At least nowadays, I would argue. You'd probably just call it either a Rasierer, which could also refer to a non-electrical razor, or if you want to make it clear that it's an electrical one, you can also just call it elektrischer Rasierer, so like electrical razor, or Elektrorasierer. Not necessarily prettier than Rasierapparat, but I think it might be a little bit more common. Next one.
Sägerspanner. Sawdust. Serge.
Sägespäne!
Sägespäne is how I would say it. The Swedish one actually sounds almost exactly like the German one though, except that he doesn't scream it, so let's go back to that. So in German we say Sägespäne, and in Swedish he says
Sägerspäne.
So yeah, I don't know, sounds almost the same to me. Next one.
Skål. Cheers. Soje.
Prost!
Prost is how I would say it. And this is actually one of the most important words to know in German, in my opinion, which is why when I designed my merch products these past few months, I included it on the design on the beer mug, the bottle opener, and also put it on stickers and a coffee mug. Okay, that was it with the third part. Now let's move on to the fourth part.
Régulation de la propriété.
Regulation of property.
Dispositivo di fondo.
Grundstücksverkehrsgenehmigungszuständigkeitsübertragungsverordnung.
As a German, I'd like to apologize for a language. So obviously this last part has kind of like a different theme to it. This is more about very long German words, which I know that a lot of non-Germans find this very funny. Some Germans find it funny too. But as I said before, the reason for these very long German words is that whenever we create a new German compound word out of several individual words, we just put them all together in one word and don't leave a space in between. But technically, there are a lot of individual words in this long word. So I'm gonna just read it again for you. I would probably pronounce it Grundstücksverkehrsgenehmigungszuständigkeitsübertragungsverordnung. And if I had to translate this literally, which the translations that they gave were more like, this is what the law is called in our country, but this whole thing obviously has a lot more words than the other ones did. So if you translated it literally, it would be something along the lines of property, traffic, licensing, responsibility, transmitting, regulation, or something along those lines. If you guys have a better translation for it, let me know in the comments below. This is kind of tricky, but let's move on to the next long one. Traffic law.
Loi de trafic.
Loi de trafic.
Traffic law.
Legge di traffico.
Legge di traffico.
Verkehrsinfrastrukturfinanzierungsgesellschaftsgesetz.
Boom, boom. So I would pronounce this Verkehrsinfrastrukturfinanzierungsgesellschaftsgesetz, which means something like Traffic Infrastructure Financing Association Law. Does that make sense? Not really. Doesn't make sense to German ears either. Next one.
Loi du bœuf.
Beef law.
Beef law.
Legge della carne.
Rindfleischetikettierungsüberwachungsaufgabenübertragungsgesetz.
The way that his face went back to like this grumpy man afterwards. This one is actually known as the longest still existing word in German. There is another one that is even longer, the Donaudampfschifffahrtsgesellschaft blah blah blah. Maybe you've heard this one before. I know that I did say that in another reaction video before. Donaudampfschifffahrtselektrizitätenhauptbetriebswerk. Donaudampfschifffahrtselektrizitätenhauptbetriebwerk Bauunternehmer Beamtengesellschaft. Oh my god, I did it! But that one was never actually used in Germany. It's just a made-up word to show how long German words can get. And now this one, the Rindfleischetikettierungs blah blah blah, is the actual name of a law that was in use until 2013. I actually think that most of these laws and regulations that they mention in the sketch are real, actually. Now this one I would pronounce Rindfleischetikettierungsüberwachungsaufgabenübertragungsgesetz. I'm honestly having a good day today because I haven't repeated any of those yet, which I kind of expected that I would have trouble saying these and I would have to cut a few tries out, but I've so far read all of these on the first try. But to translate it, it would be something like beef labeling, surveillance, task, transmitting, law, or something like that. So it's not exactly just a beef law, which sounds like a very simple thing, but it's something very specific.
Régulation de la fortune.
Regulation of fortune.
Legge di patrimonio.
Vermögenszuordnungszuständigkeitsübertragungsverordnung.
I would pronounce this Vermögenszuordnungszuständigkeitsübertragungsverordnung, and it translates to something like fortune, assignment, responsibility, transferring, regulation, something like that. But for this one, I actually couldn't find anything that said that this was a real law, or a real regulation. So I'm not quite sure if they made this up or if they messed it up so that it's not exactly the way that the regulation is actually called, but when I googled it, I couldn't find anything. Boom! Missed that one before I stopped, but let's keep going.
Balance de la centrifugeuse.
Balance centrifugation.
Equilibrio della centrifuga.
Gleichgewichtsdichte Gradientenzentrifugation.
Okay, Gleichgewichtsdichten. No, now I messed it up. Gleichgewichtsdichte Gradientenzentrifugation. This sounds like a very specific term in sciences, so I'm not quite sure if this is exactly the same as just balance centrifugation, which is a much shorter word, which is what they gave us as a translation. But this one literally means something like balance, density, gradient, centrifugation. Not sure if you guys feel any smarter than you did before with these long words. I personally don't really, but that was it with their video. They actually have a fifth part that they have dedicated entirely to soccer, I think for one of the World Cups in the past. And I think they also did that one a little later on, but I'm just gonna stop here. You can find all the links to the original videos in the info box below though, including the one for the soccer one if you wanna watch that. Big shout out to these guys from the Copycat channel. I don't think they're active anymore, but they're German and their comedy was really good actually. Just, you know, this simple comedy with no explanations really, just sitting there, feeding some of the stereotypes, but at least I could explain to you that not every German looks like that. Not even every Bavarian looks like that, with the hat and the beer and the pretzel, even though I will say that beers and pretzels are still pretty prevalent in Bavaria, which is something that I sometimes miss here. So if you ever make it to Munich or other parts of Bavaria or Germany, definitely try to go to a beer garden, have a nice fresh beer and a pretzel for sure. But yeah, besides that, I hope you guys found it as entertaining as I did, and hopefully I could give you guys some background knowledge, some context by reacting to these videos. By the way, while watching these, I thought, why not make a video that's kind of like as a response to these videos with words that actually sound prettier in German than they do in these other languages? Let me know if you think that would be a cool idea. Let me know in the comments below, or by giving this video a thumbs up. And if you think this would be a funny idea, I'm definitely gonna do that in the future. And if you have any words that you have on your mind right now that you feel like, yeah, I actually think that this word sounds prettier in German than it does in French or in English, then comment that down below. I have like a list of maybe 5, 6, 7 words that I definitely know I feel like are prettier in German, but sometimes I think of a word throughout the day and then I don't write it down, and I kind of hate myself for that right now because I feel like there are a lot of those words. But maybe you guys can help me and we can actually create a longer list, and then I can make that as a response video. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for free. Also activate the little bell right next to the subscribe button so that you never miss a new video of mine in the future. And of course, you can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And you can also support me and my channel on Patreon and buymeacoffee.com. And if you want to, you can buy this t-shirt, for example, that says, "I only understand train station." If you want to know what that means, you're gonna have to check out my podcast that is called Understanding Train Station. But you can also get one of my Servus hats or t-shirts or hoodies, or just ones with my logo on them, or of course the authentic Bavarian beer mug that I designed for you guys. I have stickers with German curse words and a lot of other stuff on them. I have coffee mugs. I have hoodies that say "Ein helles und eine Breze bitte," which is exactly that sentence that you will need when you go to a beer garden in Bavaria, because it means a lager and a pretzel, please. So if you're interested in any of those products, just go over now to my shop, felifromgermany.com. I hope you find something that you like, and I hope I'll see you next time. Tschüss!